Welcome back to Books You Haven't Read. It's me, Nate Rankin, your host and only guide to getting out of this digital hellscape that you've buried yourself into. That's right, the only way out is through, guys. So you are now required to keep clicking on my videos with my face in it until you reach the end of the internet. It's a tough road ahead, but I believe in you. While you're here, I'm going to talk about some of my recent reads, and these are all, the first three at least, are all, I think, solidly what you could call experimental novels. The last, not really experimental, but I make the rules, and more importantly, the video titles. Alright, so this first book, or I should say, this video is kind of brought to you by this first book. The author of this book, let me give you a clear view of it, reached out to me, solicited a review from me. The book is called Moieties by Elatron Frass, and sent me an advanced copy of this a couple months ago. In which, by the way, if you are an author and you are interested in me doing a review, you can reach out to me. There's an email in the description below. I'll try and keep that in all of my videos from now on. I will just say as a general caveat, I don't say yes often. I love Bartleby the Scrivener. I would prefer not to. So I will gladly take a look. I'm just saying, listen, I'm very picky when it comes to books, especially featuring stuff. So you can absolutely send it to me, just with the understanding that I'm picky. Okay. So this is a book told in like 3-ish narratives. Maybe you could call it 5 if you were counting the, marginalia, both the pictorial and the sort of textual marginalia. Because if you did, that would be about 5. So you have Subject L's narrative, and that starts, on the left side of the book and goes about 46 pages in one way. And then you have Subject R's narrative, and that starts kind of from the back of the book and goes 46 pages in the other way. It is kind of confusing because there are 2 Subject R's like referenced in the book, because one of the Subject R's is Subject L's original conjoined twin brother, but then also Subject R is the new guy, the other half of the book that you're reading that gets sort of newly conjoined onto her. The book is about basically brother and sister who have run away from some kind of Gnostic church cult, and they are conjoined twins. They get separated. The brother, spoiler alert, becomes like catatonic and can't function, and the sister gets reattached to this other guy, Subject R, who is a faithful member of the church and is actually married, but his wife very quickly and kind of is done away with, and she's apparently not a good receiver for whatever experimental stuff that their church is. The 2 sort of narratives kind of function as like this, I guess, somewhat mythic or symbolic sort of hallucinatory dreamscape of their church. And the church, I believe one of the last footnotes makes note that this is going to be saved in their archives. So somehow the church contrives a way to conjoin this faithful member and the runaway twin. And the kind of dry medical narrative is given in the undernotes of the main text, and they follow along with sort of their respective characters. I can kind of show you a little more how the book works. Once I change camera views.
Okay, so the first thing I kind of want to say about this book, it's SBP is the publisher that stands for Soul Body Press. And I just want to give kind of a shout out to them. This is a really nice kind of binding. I got a hardcover from the author themselves, but it's both like really nice binding, and also like the quality of paper is like really good and really thick, which I think is particularly helpful for a novel like this that is going to make you kind of read things over, once or twice, because you're probably going to be reading down here and then all these, and you'll just be flipping back and forth, so it helps to kind of have a durable paper. I only bring this up just because I'm a pretty regular consumer of independent books, and some of the printing is leaves a little more wanting than I guess you otherwise would. But so here we've got, you can kind of see, these are the undernotes that I was talking about, the footnotes, and then this is the main text. I would personally recommend, I didn't do it this way, but I would personally recommend like starting with the undernotes and then just read the full way through until you get to page 46. So this is the halfway point. And then once you've read kind of all these undernotes, then I would say go back and read the main text. Because this is kind of the more sort of normal English language, like what's going on. It's from a more objective place, and then this is the kind of idiosyncratic, dream hallucination thing that's going on. So this is, you've kind of been able to make out, this is some of the marginalia. This stuff right here, all this, anything that's not kind of a part of these main two texts, all this is going to correspond with the opposite page number. So like you can look at like right here, these are mirror images. But if you look at page 2 of subject R, so let's go there, you'll see the other half. I lost my place, that was stupid. So you can see holy, and then you flip over, holy and hall and hallowed. See? HALLOWED. Triple SPI, spirit, you kind of sink us into and it just keeps on going on and on. I will be honest, I don't know really much what the sort of pictures mean, or obviously some of them are, there were a couple where we had we got some people sliced open right here like that, thematically I can understand what that means, but but that's how, like I said, I would recommend reading the undernotes first, and then kind of read each respective section, and then like the stuff like this I think you can kind of come to last. It's not like hugely important to the plot, but it does add some color. So yeah.
The narratives both inhabit kind of similar dream hellscapes, but, not necessarily in a way that coheres. They're literally like smashed sort of together, and they both end kind of mid-sentence. But they are, like, the narratives are kind of the same substance, and there's obviously some overlap, but it doesn't feel like the two are talking to each other. It's very hostile. Kind of the text makes that pretty clear. My overall kind of feelings on it felt kind of like emo Anne Carson, or occult Anne Carson, or else like something that's far more in the vernacular of like Arthur Rimbaud's A Season in Hell. The vast majority of what I read, even when I read like experimental stuff, is imagined or cast in my mind as like real life live action characters. And this novel felt like, it definitely started out in that, but then it gets into kind of weird, I don't know, almost animated, sort of hallucinogenic, dreamy animations, if that sort of makes sense. I would give it four. I give it 4 stars. I think if you are more into like occult things, or just maybe the subject of Gnosticism in general, you might like especially like this. If you're into conjoined twins, you might especially like this. But I don't know. I think it's ultimately you're going to love it if you're into those sort of specific kinds of subjects. But even if you're not, it's very interesting to kind of discover this text and let it teach you. Now, these next two books, I actually recently got on my trip to Chicago, and both of them came from Myopic Books, the used bookstore. This first one is just one of your classical experimental works. Hopefully it's kind of focusing enough there. I realize the cover's pretty white. This is Exercises in Style by Raymond Queneau, famously one of the co-founders of Oulipo. In this book is just 99 iterations of the same story, which is kind of hardly a story. It's a series of events, a series of details. It's basically like a narrator sees a pair of guys get into an argument on a bus. One guy runs away from the other to an open seat, and then 2 hours later, the narrator sees that runaway guy in a separate place talking to a friend of his about how he should add like more buttons to his coat or something. And that's it. That's quite literally it. It's understandable why the details would be simple, especially if you're going to iterate it 99 times. But what the book, I think, really demonstrates is like the flexibility of storytelling, or the flexibility of writing, the optionalities that, writers are faced with, or the many distinct ways you can slightly skew a story, the many techniques that you can use to constrain your writing, and then by that sort of produce new stories. It's one of those books that was, much bandied about in various creative writing classes that I've taken in my life, though I was never assigned to read it. One can easily imagine a teacher assigning this book to her class and having them come up with kind of their own renditions. I think that would be a really good creative writing exercise. Though, as an exercise, I will say, as a reading experience, it can get a little boring, especially if you're going to read like 30 or 40 renditions at a time. But I think it's most valuable for someone like an aspiring writer, because it is a book about the joys and struggles and, let's be honest, maybe even the boredom of writing. This book has inspired me, at least, to want to think how I can introduce like writing prompts into, or some kind of writing game into my friends' board game nights that we kind of have semi-regularly. So I'm still working on that. We'll see what I develop with them. So I was glad to kind of break the seal on a Queneau novel. I think I gave this like 3 stars. It's sort of it's fine kind of reading experience. I'm a lot more interested in reading Zazie and the Metro. I do have a copy of that book, but there's a lot of Oulipo on my shelf, so hopefully more to come on that front. Another book that I found at the Myopic bookstore, also a white cover. There we go. You can see it though. That's the Book of Jokes. This is a Dalkey Archive Press book, and this is the Book of Jokes by Momus. This book tells its story in alternating chapters, alternating perspectives between what you come to find out is a father and a son, and they exist in a world that is, structured by like the laws of jokes, as opposed to, say, the laws of gravity or physics or whatever. The characters are very aware of this. The fictional fourth wall is broken quite constantly, or if not constantly, like it's done a number of ways. The artifice of the world is very apparent, but the way that you as a reader are tested is that, within this very silly little world, one of the characters and narrators, quite frankly, is a huge pedophile, as well as a what would you call it, bestiality aficionado. What's the PC term? Animal rapist. And the physical details of some of these jokes are very explicitly rendered in like almost comic or cartoonish language that does, more to discomfort than to produce laughter. There is this kind of ironic meta distance that, the characters have, because like, one of the narrators is sort of coolly hip to how he's in a universe ruled by jokes, almost like kind of exhausted by it. But at the same time, some of these scenes are just so vivid in a couple sections that you can't help feel uncomfortable or feel like you're supposed to feel uncomfortable. It was written in 2009, which was definitely a kind of an era. It was, I don't know, sort of the end of the raunchy comedy era, at least movies wise. But I think in the broader culture too. My memories of it, at least, were that, being offensive for offensiveness' sake was a little more valued and revered at the beginning of the 20th century, though, of course, it's been 15 years since this book was published, so I'm sure we're cycling around to this sensibility once again. So I can't say if the humor was in this book was in part informed by that milieu, but it is clear that part of the artistic endeavor here is to joke about all of the worst things. But of course, it's also like the book is constantly running into its own artificiality. Like you can kind of feel like the stakes don't really matter because you kind of understand there's like an unrealness about this book, that it doesn't, exist, certainly doesn't exist in the same universe that I exist. So you're kind of, I don't know, you're jockeyed in between sort of the visceral offense and the, blasé, nothing matters attitude of the format itself. I didn't know much about this author coming into it, but I kind of like what I've discovered about him. Momus, by the way, is the name of the Greek god of mockery. The guy's real name is Nick Curry, and he has been a lot of everything in his life. He's been making music since like the late 80s, early 90s. He's also been a really like prolific blogger, as well as YouTuber and columnist. On top of all that, he's very much like embraced the web early and often in his career. And then, oh, by the way, he's written a couple novels now. So that's great. I highly recommend checking out his music. I would describe it as if, like the 60s folk singer Donovan. He kind of has a Donovan voice. But if that guy had like the musical range of like Tom Waits or Sufjan Stevens, if you know those two. Structure of this novel is, not as rigid as something like Exercises in Style. Not every chapter ends right on the punchline, though the endings do tend to be punchy, right? They follow sort of a joke-like logic and usually end very abruptly. But the jokes are very common refrains that, most of us have probably heard in some form or another, or else elements of jokes or joking detritus are used and refashioned to either cast the scene that's set or kind of be their own joke that the characters are telling to each other. I give it high points for creativity and conceptualness. It was one of those books that's clever and, definitely got a number of wry grins from me, but it didn't actually, I think, ever make me laugh out loud, for whatever that's worth to you. It lends itself to some pretty quick reading. Each chapter is like 4 to 5 pages, and it's like less than 200 overall. But at the same time, I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna kind of forget about the actual journey. I don't know. It's interesting. I might check out some more of his writing. I'm a lot more interested to check out some of his music. So, and if you're familiar with this guy, Momus or Nick Curry, I'd be interested in what you think of either his work or of his musical work or his non-musical work. Let me know in the comments below. Finally, I wanted to talk about another recently published book. This is called Norma by Sarah Mintz, and this came out also this year. Okay, so this is admittedly not one of the experimental books. This is a pretty normal novel, but I'm squeezing it in because it is something to talk about, and I want to talk about it. Norma is an older woman. She's in her like late 60s or early 70s. Her husband has just died after they've had a long marriage together, and they had no children, and so she's suddenly very rootless. And I don't think she expresses it in this exact way, but she's like very surprised that she is, suddenly so rootless after the death of kind of such an objectively insignificant man. She kind of has this understanding that they're both, I don't know, pretty insignificant characters in the large view of things. And so what does she do? She anchors herself in new hobbies. And these new hobbies are, one, going to the grocery store and just perusing it a lot, and two, like obsessively transcribing these random files. They're usually videos, sometimes they might be audio only, that are uploaded to sort of a portal on the internet that she haunts kind of throughout the day. And the clips could be anything. They could be a decades old American soap opera that's really popular with, Russian speakers. Or they could be police witness interviews or recordings of therapy sessions. All of them are like a minute long. It's not exactly described how this works, but you kind of get the sense that they're sort of chopped up indiscriminately, like larger files are uploaded and then they're chopped up indiscriminately so that they'll get, so since they're only a minute long, they'll get transcribed quicker. And she has favorites that upload to this portal. And one of the series of clips that she gets really sucked into is the series of files, like police interviews and therapy sessions, of a stepfather's sexual abuse of his stepdaughter. And this child is a young woman now, and she works at one of the grocery stores that Norma kind of haunts around. So Norma recognizes her from one of the video clips that she's seen, and she has this just like overwhelming, aching desire to, step in and, if not fix the girl's life, then like, intervene or be like a positive role model for her. Because, intervening could be very powerful and meaningful, and Norma's not really doing anything that feels particularly powerful or meaningful. I thought this was a really good like online book because of, or at least like what it means to be kind of online right now, because it does really well to capture the random and incompleteness of the internet in a succinct way with these short clips. Obviously, the time, is similar to like a TikTok video. The internet these days, to me at least, feels more random, more contextless, more out of nowhere than it ever has. But it also, this book captures someone who is deeply well-meaning while also just being a weird fucking obsessive. Like, the site obviously doesn't exist in real life, but part of what makes the book so compelling is that this woman is like so idiosyncratic in a way that is like broadly recognizable, I think, to a lot of us. I think most online people understand getting obsessed with just a weird little internet thing. And that's sort of essentially what's going on, of course, amidst some bigger grief in her life. And the alluring thing about the internet is that you can always rationalize away like your obsessive behavior as a good thing. You will always find a way to see the good in whatever you're doing, like, writing captions for a soap opera. Yeah, that's harmless fun, helps some foreigners understand what they're watching, but what happens when police interviews get involved, or when recorded therapy sessions show up in your portal, both of which are very strictly supposed to be illegal to show up in this. Like, we often disguise our vanity in altruism when it comes to activities on the internet. And finally, kind of the last thing I want to say that I thought was really good about this book is that it's a good example of like a pathetic character that you feel like real sympathy for. It's very obvious that like Norma's not a good person, but she's not particularly bad, or at least not in a way that any of us would see ourselves as bad. But if you want to talk about books that are, I don't know, just like good models for emulating characterization, this would be high up on my list. It sounds strange coming from a young guy like me, but this age, this age and this setting, being a recent widow, I think is an especially combustible time for people. But it's also kind of just tragically hidden in the margins of your life, like, because 60-year-old, 70-year-old people are mostly invisible to, I don't know, contemporary or popular culture. A lot of Norma's ruminations are on kind of the unromantic side of her life, or like just the lack of story that she has to tell about her life. Multiple times she talks about how, they never had kids, and it was kind of not necessarily an active decision, but it's a decision that's been made and it's over the hill and done with. And so, you kind of come back to her trying to interact with this young girl, this woman, and wonder if that's not some kind of latent, parental desire that's sort of coming out. There's this sense of loss here, the feeling that coming more from like a FOMO feeling than a sincere desire to actually have had a kid. It just comes from like a feeling of a lack of significance. And I just thought it was really well rendered. I am not ashamed to say this did make me a little misty-eyed at certain points. So yeah, I would highly recommend this. This is probably my favorite of the stack, but I would recommend all of these if they, sound interesting to you. So thank you for watching. More videos are coming down the pike. I appreciate Electron Frass and Subtle Body Press sending me a free book. Check them out. And if you have stuff to pitch me, email address in the description. Have a good rest of your day.